They say love has no borders. That when two hearts find each other across the vast, invisible distances of the digital world, no ocean, no checkpoint, no immigration officer can keep them apart. Emeka believed that. He believed it so deeply, so completely, that he packed a bag, withdrew his savings, crossed an international border, and walked straight into the arms of a woman he had never, not once, met in person. What happened next shook two nations. It became a story whispered in barbershops in Lagos, shared in hushed tones in Accra's markets, and debated furiously on social media across West Africa. This is that story. Stay with me, because this one doesn't end the way you think. His name was Emeka Okafor, 29 years old, born and raised in Onitsha, Anambra State, Nigeria, a city that sits proudly on the banks of the Niger River and has long been known as one of West Africa's most energetic commercial hubs. Emeka was, by all accounts, an ordinary young man in the very best sense of that phrase. He wasn't rich, but he wasn't struggling either. He worked as a logistics coordinator for a mid-sized trading company. He drove a fairly decent car. He had his own apartment, small but his. He sent money home to his mother every month without fail. People who knew him described him the same way again and again. Emeka was a gentle person. He was the kind of man who believed in doing things the right way. He trusted people. Maybe too much. He had never been married. He had a few past relationships, nothing that lasted. Like millions of young Nigerians navigating the chaotic intersection of ambition, urban life, and loneliness, Emeka had begun spending more time online. And it was online, specifically on a popular social media platform, that he first encountered her. Her name, as she gave it to him, was Abina. The first message came in on a quiet Tuesday evening. She had commented on one of his posts. Something simple, funny, even. He replied. She replied back. And just like that, the way these things always begin, a conversation was born. Abina told him she was Ghanaian, living in Accra. She sent photos. She was, by the evidence of those images, a beautiful woman. Bright smile, warm eyes, fashionably dressed. She described herself as a businesswoman. Fabrics and fashion, she said. She had her own small boutique. Emeka was interested. More than interested, he was captivated. They began talking every day. Morning greetings. Long calls in the evening. Voice notes when typing felt too slow. Video calls, though Abina, she explained, had frequent issues with her internet connection. So those calls were often brief and blurry. Looking back, that detail matters. But Emeka wasn't looking back. He was looking forward. At this woman who laughed at his jokes, who remembered small details he mentioned in passing, who told him he was the kind of man she had always prayed for. Weeks became months. 3 months in, Emeka told his closest friend, a man we'll call Chidi, about the relationship. I told him to be careful, Chidi would later say. I said, Emeka, you have never seen this woman face to face. You don't really know her. He said he knew her better than he had ever known any woman. He said some people can know each other in a week what others don't learn in years. I didn't argue with him. You cannot argue with a man who is in love. By the 5th month, the relationship had grown into something neither of them, or at least so Emeka believed, could easily define. She called him her future. He called her his answer. And then came the moment that would change everything. It was Abina who suggested it first. Or at least it appeared that way. She had been talking about how she wished they could stop hiding behind screens. She said she wanted to cook for him. She said she wanted to hold his hand and walk through the streets of Accra, her city, and show him everything she loved about it. Emeka didn't need much convincing. He told his mother he was taking a short trip. He didn't give full details. He knew she would worry, would ask too many questions. He told his boss he needed a few personal days. He went to his bank and withdrew what he described to friends as enough to make a good impression. By the estimates of people close to him, He was carrying the equivalent of several 100,000 naira in cash, plus his debit card. He wasn't going to show up empty-handed to meet the woman he intended to marry. He booked a flight from Lagos to Accra. It's not a long journey, barely an hour in the air. Ghana and Nigeria share more than geography. They share language patterns, cultural rhythms, food, music, and for millions of people, family ties that cross back and forth across that border every single day. Emeka had been to Ghana once before, years earlier, for a trade fair with his company. He knew the country slightly. He felt comfortable. His last message to Chidi before boarding the plane was cheerful. "Brother, next time you hear from me, I'll have good news. Pray for me." Chidi prayed. But the news that came back was not good. Emeka landed at Kotoka International Airport in Accra on a weekday afternoon. The city received him the way it receives everyone, with heat, noise, color, and movement. Trotros weaving through traffic. Hawkers at intersections selling everything from water sachets to phone chargers. The smell of street food drifting from every corner. He had arranged to meet Abina at a specific location, a residential area in one of Accra's neighborhoods. She had sent him an address. She said her cousin would come to the airport to pick him up. A young man was indeed waiting for him. He introduced himself. He was friendly. He helped with the bag. He made small talk on the drive over. Emeka was relaxed, excited even. He was minutes away from meeting her. 5 months of calls, of voice notes, of late-night conversations were about to become real. The distance was about to collapse. He had no idea what was waiting for him. The details of what happened next were pieced together later. From witness accounts, police statements, and the fragmented phone calls Emeka managed to make before everything fell apart. He arrived at the house. It was not a boutique owner's residence. It was not the warm, welcoming home of a successful businesswoman excited to receive the man she loved. What he walked into was a trap. The specifics of the violence have been reported differently across sources, and out of respect for the dignity of everyone affected, we will not dwell on the graphic details. But what is known is this: Emeka was attacked. The people inside that house were not who they had presented themselves to be online. Abina, the woman whose voice he had fallen in love with, whose photos had lit up his phone for months, was either a constructed identity, a front woman for a criminal scheme, or both. The cousin who had picked him up from the airport was part of it. Emeka's money was taken, his phone, his documents, and the violence that accompanied that robbery was severe enough that Emeka's life was in immediate danger. He was a man who had crossed a border for love. He had ended up bleeding on the floor of a house where nobody loved him at all. How Emeka survived, and accounts differ on the extent of his injuries, depended on a combination of luck and the intervention of neighbors who heard sounds they could not ignore. Ghanaian police were alerted. They arrived. What they found at the scene opened an investigation that would eventually reveal this was not an isolated incident. This was, at least in part, an organized operation that had been running for some time. Romance scammers, yes, but ones who had escalated far beyond fraud into physical violence and robbery. Emeka was taken for medical treatment. Back in Nigeria, Chidi tried to reach him for 2 days without answer. When he finally got through, a borrowed phone, a weak signal, a voice Chidi barely recognized, what he heard broke him. He kept saying, "I should have listened." He said it over and over. "I should have listened." Emeka's mother, when she found out, reportedly couldn't speak for hours. The Nigerian community in Accra rallied to help, because that is what communities do even across borders, even in crisis. They helped with logistics, with paperwork, with the quiet, unglamorous business of getting a broken young man back home. When Emeka finally returned to Nigeria, he was not the same person who had left. Emeka's story is devastating, but it is not unique. Every week, every single week across West Africa, across the entire African continent, and beyond, men and women fall victim to romance fraud. The numbers are staggering. The International Criminal Police Organization, Interpol, has documented hundreds of millions of dollars lost annually to romance scams across Africa alone. But the money is almost never the most painful part. The most painful part is what Emeka experienced. The emotional investment. The months of believing. The vulnerability of genuinely, sincerely opening your heart to what you believed was another human being who was doing the same. Romance scammers are, at their core, identity thieves, but not of your bank details. First and most viciously, they steal your emotional reality. They construct a person who does not exist, and they make you fall in love with that construction. And then, in cases like Emeka's, some of them go further. When the victim arrives in person, carrying the financial and emotional proof of how real it all felt to them, there are people waiting to take everything. The digital world has made connection beautiful and dangerous at exactly the same time. So what do we take from Emeka's story? Not cynicism. Cynicism would be easy and wrong. Love is real. Online relationships can and do become beautiful, lasting, genuine partnerships. People meet across borders every day and build real lives together. That truth must not be buried under the weight of stories like this one. But there are things, specific, concrete things, that Emeka's story teaches us, at a cost we should never have had to pay. First, video calls are not enough. Manipulated images, borrowed photos, scripted calls, these can all be faked. If someone consistently avoids clear, unfiltered video interaction over a long period of time, that is a signal worth examining. Second, meeting in person for the first time should never happen at a private location arranged solely by the other party. Public places. People who know where you are. Someone at home with your real-time location. Third, never travel to meet someone you've only known online while carrying large amounts of cash or valuables. If the relationship is genuine, the person will understand caution. If they don't, that too is information. Fourth, tell people where you're going. Exactly. Chidi knew Emeka was going to Ghana. He didn't know the address, the name of the person picking him up, or the specific neighborhood. That gap, that small, informal gap, could have been the difference between life and death. And finally, perhaps most importantly, there is no shame in being deceived. Emeka was not foolish. He was human. The people who targeted him were sophisticated, patient, and deliberately cruel. The shame belongs entirely to them. Emeka survived. Not every story like his ends that way. If you are in a relationship right now that exists only on a screen, this video is not asking you to end it. It is asking you to slow down, to verify, to protect yourself with the same care that you would give to any other serious decision in your life. Because love, real love, will wait for you to be safe. And anyone who won't, may not be who they say they are.